Mesa Verde just picked up another honor. It's now certified as an international dark sky park, praised for some of the clearest night skies left in the country. That's on top of the title it already carried. A UNESCO World Heritage Site, home to the best preserved architecture ever left behind by the ancestral Pueblo people. And almost every visitor makes the exact same mistake. They arrive, they look up at the alcoves, they photograph the towers wedged into the cliff face, and they leave convinced they've seen everything Mesa Verde has to offer. They haven't. The part of this place that actually changed how historians understand its builders was never in the cliffs at all. It was buried, sealed in darkness, underneath the very houses tourists walk past, underneath their own boots. What researchers eventually excavated from that underground layer wasn't just unexpected. It forced a rewrite of the whole story. A snowstorm and a lucky wrong turn. Picture the setting first because it shapes everything that follows. Mesa Verde is a high, flat tableland cut apart by deep canyons, and in the winter of 1888 it belonged to cattle, not scholars. Two ranchers, Richard Wetherill and Charlie Mason, were out chasing lost livestock through the snow when they rode up to the canyon rim and looked across. What they saw stopped them cold. The largest cliff dwelling ever found in North America, tucked into a natural alcove like it had been abandoned the day before. Multi-story stone rooms, towers, open courtyards, walls built from shaped sandstone that had been sitting untouched for 6 centuries. They named it Cliff Palace, and it's easy to understand why the name stuck. From a distance, in a snowstorm, it looks like a frozen city someone simply walked out of. That first impression, houses, streets, a town, was the natural one. It was also the one that delayed real understanding of the site for decades. Because the buildings people could see from across the canyon were never the point. The rooms that actually mattered to the people who built this place were the round ones sunk into the earth, and almost nobody paid attention to them at first. The scale nobody expects. Before going underground, it's worth pausing on just how big this site really is, because ruin undersells it badly. Mesa Verde holds more than 4,000 recorded archaeological sites spread across mesa tops and canyon walls, including over 600 separate cliff dwellings. Cliff Palace is simply the most photogenic entry in a very long list. The people who built all of it, the ancestral Puebloans, weren't passing through. They settled the region around the 6th century and stayed for roughly 700 years. That's not one dramatic generation. It's 20-plus generations farming corn on the mesa top, raising children, burying their dead, and building continuously against one of the harshest landscapes in North America. In 1978, UNESCO made it official, naming Mesa Verde one of the very first World Heritage Sites on the planet. And still, the average visit follows the same script. Look up, take a photo of the alcove, walk the overlooked trail, drive home satisfied. Meanwhile, the actual core of this civilization, the part that explains who these people were, not just how they built, sat below the surface the entire time, waiting. From souvenir hunting to actual science. For a few years after 1888, Cliff Palace and its neighbors were treated less like an archaeological site and more like a shopping trip, pottery and turquoise hauled out by anyone with a shovel. That changed in 1891, when a young Swedish researcher named Gustav Nordenskjöld showed up and did something almost nobody had bothered doing yet. He measured, photographed, and logged exactly where each object was found instead of just pocketing it. As proper excavations spread across the site over the following decades, a pattern emerged, or really, a pattern sank. The most significant structures kept turning out to be underground, chambers dug beneath the living areas, beneath the daily foot traffic of the village. Every easy explanation, storage pit, root cellar, basement, fell apart the closer anyone looked. These rooms had been plastered, shaped, and returned to again and again across generations. The builders had poured their best craftsmanship into spaces that ordinary visitors would never even notice. One word that unlocks the whole site. That word is kiva. Said plainly, it just means a round room, built partly or fully below ground. Said accurately, it means something closer to 5 buildings compressed into one. Inside a kiva, a Pueblo community held religious ceremony, resolved political disputes, taught its children, staged ritual performance, and gathered as a group. Combine your church, your courthouse, your school, and your theater into a single round chamber, then bury it beneath the village floor. That's a kiva. And here's the detail worth sitting with. Kivas weren't used for ordinary life. Nobody cooked dinner down there or slept there the way they would in a regular household. The underground was deliberately set apart, reserved for something the surface world wasn't meant to touch. Which raises an obvious question. If there's no ordinary doorway cut into the side of these sealed rooms, how did anyone actually get inside? Climbing down. You went in through the roof. Walk through it slowly, because no photograph captures this properly. A narrow opening is cut into the kiva's roof, with a wooden ladder rising through it into daylight. You climb down backward, into cooler air that smells like packed earth, old stone, and wood smoke. Once your eyes adjust, the engineering becomes obvious. A central fire pit anchors the room. Near the wall, a narrow shaft channels fresh air down from the surface, and standing between that shaft and the fire sits a single upright slab of stone, a deflector, angled so the incoming draft bends around it instead of snuffing the flames. Low stone benches ring the walls, and stout pilasters rise from them to help carry the weight of the roof overhead. Put it together and you get a sealed underground room where a fire can burn cleanly for hours, where smoke draws upward and out, where air keeps circulating on its own. A ventilation system engineered by hand roughly 800 years ago, one that would genuinely impress a modern builder. Outside, wind and snow batter the mesa. Down here, it's warm, lit by firelight, and quiet except for the crackle of the flames and whatever ceremony was underway. Why did everyone leave? For all that precision, the machines keep circling back to the one question they can't answer. The same question Wetherell and Mason unknowingly wrote into the historical record back in 1888. Why is this place so completely empty? Sometime near the end of the 13th century, the people of Mesa Verde left, and not gradually, over generations. Within a generation or two, the entire region emptied out. The fires in the kivas went cold, and nobody returned to relight them. Trearing science, pioneered in the early 20th century by astronomer A.T. Douglas, offers a window into exactly what was happening at the time. Wide rings mark good years, narrow, pinched rings mark drought years, and the timber preserved at Mesa Verde tells a harsh story. A severe, sustained drought settled over the region in the final decades of the 1200s. For a society whose survival depended on mesa-top corn, that wasn't an inconvenience. It was existential. There's a wrinkle in the timeline worth noting. The famous cliff dwellings, the ones everyone photographs, were built late, mostly within the final century of occupation. For most of their 7 centuries at Mesa Verde, these people lived out in the open on the mesa tops. Only near the end did they pull back into defensible alcoves, hauling stone and timber into tight overhangs to build their most spectacular architecture right as everything else was falling apart. People don't usually retreat into a cliff face for the scenery, they do it when they need protection. Drought alone likely doesn't explain everything. After 7 centuries of continuous settlement, the land itself was probably worn down. Forests thinned for fuel and beams, soil exhausted, game scarce. Some late sites show clear signs of conflict. And beneath all of it there may have been a deeper unraveling, social strain, a sense that the old systems, centered on those sacred underground rooms, had stopped holding the world together the way they once had. They didn't vanish. Here's the part that gets left out of every lost civilization retelling. These people didn't disappear. They migrated south and east, toward the Rio Grande and the ancestral lands of the Hopi and Zuni. Their descendants are alive today. The Pueblo peoples of the American Southwest are the living continuation of Mesa Verde. They carried the Sipapu, the Kiva, and the old emergence stories with them when they left. So the real mystery was never where everyone went. That part is reasonably well understood. The mystery that still keeps researchers up at night is why they left so fast, and why, after building the greatest stone architecture on the continent, nobody ever came back to live in it. What was actually hidden? To be clear about what this isn't, there's no lost city buried beneath Mesa Verde, no sprawling secret network of tunnels stitching the canyons together into an underground kingdom. If you've encountered that claim somewhere, it isn't real. The truth is quieter and, honestly, more interesting. There is a hidden world beneath Mesa Verde, just not the one the myths describe. It's a world of kivas and proto-kivas, of pit houses and great communal chambers, of one genuinely unexplained tunnel beneath Cliff Palace, and of a small sacred hole in a floor that meant more than any tower built above it. This was a civilization that chose, deliberately, to bury its most important elements, belief, origin, ceremony, below the surface, and built its visible architecture almost as an afterthought on top. That's what Wetherill and Mason couldn't see across the canyon in the falling snow of 1888. It's what the early souvenir hunters dug straight past on their way to the pottery. The real story of Mesa Verde was never the buildings tucked into the cliff face. It was the engineered, sacred dark underneath them, and uncovering it changed what we understood about one of North America's great civilizations. If a society could keep its true center hidden underground for 700 years, right beneath the feet of everyone who came to look, what else might we be walking over right now, certain we've already seen the whole picture?